Hey guys, welcome back. This is Bagua Zhang class notes number 20. We made it to 20. So, great to have you back. This is the second part of the Bagua Zhang application workshop that we've done like 2 weeks ago. And this time, after we focused on the floor level distance management in the last Bagua Zhang class notes, today we will talk about distance management in a low or in a restless stance. Okay, so let's get started. There's no warm-up here because we did the warm-up in class notes number 19. So for today, the level that we're talking about is the level in a low position, in a restless stance. Okay, so in general, when I'm standing in front of an opponent and he will lower his center, I also have to match this, because if I don't, he will have easy access to my legs and can easily shoot to takedowns. So to single leg takedowns, double leg takedowns, it's all available as long as I stand in an upright position in front of an opponent who's standing in a more low-level position, like in a classic restless stance. So we have to match the level. Okay, so I always consider the hip area as important. So if you would draw a line from my hip to his hip, this should be the same height. As long as you can maintain the same level, you can also defend yourself quite well. It's always better to be slightly lower than your opponent. Depending on your mobility, of course. You can do that or not, but beware that once your center is higher than your opponent's, he has an easier access to your legs, and go for takedowns and throws. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a good wrestling stance. In comparison to an upright position, you have a much wider base. And the question always is which leg should be in front. And if you don't know, if you've never practiced any wrestling before, it's usually that you have your power leg in front, which is the one that you would usually shoot a football with. Okay, so if I have to shoot a football, I will usually take my right leg. Okay, so this is my power leg. So I take this to the front. This, depending on your martial arts experience, it might be the case that you are already familiar with boxing, and then that you prefer, for example, that your left foot is in front. Well, if this is the case, then you should not switch to another leg when moving down your center. Okay, so this is important to understand. When you're a good boxer already and you're quite used to an upright standing position in self-defense contexts or whatever, it's very dangerous to switch your stance inside of a martial encounter. So try to not switch, because switching the base, switching the stance always leaves room for takedowns as well. So if you're used to have your left leg in front, but you would shoot your football with the right leg, you have to make the decision on which leg you would like to practice on and become familiar with in a low level or in a restless stance. Okay, so for me, it's no big problem. In Bagua Zhang, we practice both legs simultaneously in the upright position, so I feel quite comfortable on both legs. But once I move into a low position, I prefer to have my right leg in front. Okay, so this is my power leg, so to say. Now, in a restless stance, in a low-level stance, you always want to have a much wider stance, a broader stance than in your regular upright stance. You always want to keep your back straight, your gaze forward. Don't round your back, of course. You will break your own alignment. And sit down and bend your knees to lower your center. Okay, so there is no real way around it. You have to practice this and get really comfortable in lowering your center through bending your knees. Okay, so if you're not mobile enough or strong enough, just put in the hours and the rest will flow. Important is that in a restless stance, if you're in a low position, you don't want to stand on one narrow line. You can already see this, how fragile this structure is. And of course, you do not want to cross your feet. You know, this sometimes happens when people move low and then they have to move to the left and the right, that they cross their feet. And this is terrible, of course. Okay, so even a small wind would just blow me away then. So keep your base really wide, like standing on railroad tracks. Okay. Now, with the power leg in front, I know that my opponent will most definitely attack this standing front leg because it's the closest leg when speaking about distance. Okay, so I have to protect my lead leg here, my power leg, always. So if my right leg is in front like here, I also put my right hand in front of my right knee in order to be able to protect myself against takedowns. Okay, so keep it there. Don't lean on your thigh. Don't be lazy. You have to have an active stance with your power hand here, my right hand protecting my knee at all times. The left hand is held up here, so this is kind of your distance management hand. You can touch your opponent, you can hit, of course, but it's a very important marker for your distance, which signals you when it's the right time to shoot or when it's dangerous and your opponent would be able to apply a shoot successfully. Okay, so power hand here protecting the lead leg and distance management hand here in order to, well, tell you something about the distance to your opponent. Okay, the back leg is always loaded, so it's placed on the balls of the foot, not on the heel. You always want to be able to move forward and to move to the sides, and therefore you need a loaded rear leg. That's different than we usually do that in a upright position, like in Bagua Zhang, we have our heel touching the ground. Here you need to have your foot on the balls so you can press into the ground more firmly. Remember, you want to stand like on railroad tracks in a wide stance. And then when you move forward, this is, you don't need to rush. It's basically moving forward inch by inch, centimeter by centimeter. You're closing the distance between you and your opponent, trying to maintain a proper alignment, trying to remember that you have to protect your front leg from incoming takedown attempts. Okay, so next step. This is about distance or how to walk forward, but now we also have to address how we should walk to the sides. Okay, so if my opponent moves, in this case here to the right side here, I have to move into the other direction, and it's always the opposite leg that pushes into the floor. Okay, so when I move here, I push with this leg. If I move to the other side, I have to push with the opposite leg. Push with this leg. Right? So the result will be that my stance will stay wide and like on railroad tracks. Okay, so I'm always pressing or pushing into the opposite leg so I can move from one side to the other side in a wide stance. If I wouldn't do that, I would have to cross my feet. And this, as I said before, is no good. Yeah, never stand on a narrow line, but keep your stance wide. Okay, now the practice here that I recommend is you move forward, and when you move forward, like you move forward twice, 2 steps, then you move 2 steps to the right, you move forward twice, you move to the left 2 steps, and then forward and backward again. So it's a nice line drill, and you can basically do that like twice or 3 times a week for, let's say, 10 minutes. Okay, you'll get really strong and a really nice, narrow, wide, low-level stance. Okay, so let's talk further about possible tie-ups. So tie-ups are when we try to grab and get a connection to the body of our opponent. And there's one golden rule, which I actually talked about before, like a minute ago. The hand that's protecting the lead leg and my knee here in front shall never rise higher than wrist or maximum to a biceps level. because as soon as I grab with this hand, the protecting hand, and I try to grab the head, for example, the neck, he will have nothing in front of him which protects my lead leg. Okay, so the road to my front leg is wide open, and he can easily shoot for the high crotch or single leg takedowns. Okay, so always keep your hand close to your knee, and when you grab the neck, always do it with the opposite hand. Okay, so that's great. Grab the neck, put your forearm against the collarbone of your partner so you have a nice push-pull mechanic in your arm, and you can really control his neck and his spine in this regard. Okay, so when I grab with this power hand here, which is the main work is protecting the knee, I can go to and grab the wrist as long as the wrist moves down, or I can go up to the biceps level and control the arm, the biceps. But the second hand here, my distance hand, that could basically grab and connect everywhere. Just don't try, or just don't cross your center line with the hands. So my left hand doesn't move to the right side and my right hand does not move to the left side. This is super important because it opens up the way to your back. Okay, so super important to understand. Another thing, so we're now talking about tie-ups here. So my partner is grabbing my wrist. This is basically the most simple tie-up you could imagine. Okay, so he's grabbing my wrist, and there's the natural reaction of many people would be to just pull back the hand. Okay, it's very easy to get away from this grip, and it's not a very dangerous grip. It's one arm against one arm, so we can always wiggle out. But there's one problem. You shall never lift your arm and pull back, because when you do so, it opens up the way for takedowns. Okay, so if I have if my opponent grabs my wrist here and I try to pull back my hand, it opens the way for him to take my front leg. Okay, so don't do that. Crossing in order to push off his grip is also very dangerous if you're still standing in your opponent's center line. Because if I cross with this arm here, I'm crossing my center line and I open up the way to my back. So don't cross your arms from one side to the other. Okay, it opens up the way to my back. He can easily pass by and take my back. No good. So pulling back, no good. Crossing arms, no good. Don't do it. You can push away his hand from your wrist, and you should, but you need to step into an angle first. Okay, so by stepping into an angle toward my opponent, I now can push off his hand without opening my back for him. This is super important to understand. So if you get rid of that one-handed wrist control, always step into an angle and only then push away his hand. Then your back will be safe, okay? Step to an angle and push the hand away. Don't pull back your front hand, just push your opponent's grip off your hand, okay? Always step into an angle. That's basic rules, but very, very hard if you didn't drill this exercise. Okay, again, another important point here. So if my opponent grabs my wrist, now I need to step. See, he's grabbing here. I need to step to the right side in order to get into an angle and then push off his hand. But if I do it to the other side, that would be a big mistake, right? Because now I do not only open the way to my back here, I also give him access to both legs because I'm standing in an angle toward him and he can basically shoot straight into my legs. Very, very dangerous. No good at all, okay? Everything is open for him to attack. So, again, no pulling back because then your front leg is not protected and the weight is moving backwards to your rear leg. Always step into an angle. So, next thing. So this was the one-handed wrist control. Now we move further. I can always use my distance management hand, my lead hand, so to say, in order to strike, but it's the main reason for having it up is to defend yourself, as well as to understand the distance that you have to your opponent. Okay. So the next thing is double wrist control. Also a common grip that people grab one wrist. They are now much stronger with this grip. So you only have one arm, two arms here. So his control is really strong. But there's a big disadvantage to this control position, which is, of course, that he can't protect from my slapping hand here. Okay, so, and this is also the way that you would get rid of this tie-up. You need to step to the side, again, step into an angle and basically hit the head. And yeah, that's how you do it. Okay, there's not much, no much fancy energy works going on here. It's basically stepping into an angle and slapping the face of your partner. Also remember that when people actually do the 2-on-1 wrist grip, that they usually also use their head for better push and pull mechanics and distance management. So this feels really nasty if your hand is in 2-on-1 control and your opponent is using the wrist the head control properly. Now, if he has this form of control on my arm, again, like I said before, I need to step into an angle and use my left hand in this case in order to push his head away, push his head down, and move to the side to get to make him lose my the control over my arm. Okay, so step to the side, slap his head, push it away. Okay, yeah. Be nice to your training partners, but remember, if you do that for real, no time for being nice. Just straight blow to the face. Okay, so grabbing the arm and now strike towards the head, push him away and move in, close the distance. Okay, so this is 2-on-1 control. Right, next one, probably the most common and most important way to control is the wrist and neck control. So I am grabbing the wrist here and I also have control over his neck. This is a very strong grip and you can do great setups for takedowns from here by pushing him around, pulling him down, shoving him away. And this is just a very, very good control, and there's a very important rule that you have to understand when you want to defend this this tie-up. Okay, so this rule is that when your opponent grabs your head, well, let's wait for that. Okay, so I'm just demonstrating how easy it is from the wrist and collar position to move into further into takedowns. Okay, so now he does have the same grip on me, with his right hand controlling my neck and his left hand controlling my wrist. And in order to get out of this grip, there's a very important rule, which is that you have to take care of this neck control first, and you always want to put your left hand underneath the elbow of your opponent. Okay, because the greatest danger of this position is that he will still shoot to your front leg, and by, for example, pushing him down, you would actually lead his hand down straight to the takedowns you want to avoid. So don't push down his arm here. It will just open the way for him to take you down. Instead, always grab underneath the elbow. Don't worry too much about the single hand grip here, because this is just a fight one-on-one. Okay, so whoever is a little bit smarter, a little bit stronger, will win this game about this grip. This is not frightening. This one is, though. So make sure your partner doesn't have, or your opponent does not have, access to your front leg. by putting your hand underneath the elbow, and when you want to step out here, you need again to step out into an angle, lower your level, push up the arm, and move into an angle again to attack your partner or your opponent. So, underneath the elbow, stepping into an angle, lowering your center, and pushing the arm out to the side. Okay, so if you understand those basic tie-ups and how to get rid of those tie-ups and how to defend your front leg and how to use the angles in order to avoid your opponent to shoot into your legs, you'll have a great advantage over most people because they don't know those rules. Okay, so of course, when you watch a wrestling match, you will see all those rules broken all the time. But remember, there is a difference between a person who is educated and practiced wrestling for decades. They usually know what they're doing and why they're doing it. But for us, since wrestling is not our primary goal, we need to understand the basics and to be as safe as possible in this common position. Okay, so that's why in this application workshop here, I talked about basic distance management in the restless position, and this is another small detail that I added afterwards, which is the head control. And in Bagua Zhang, we talk so much about alignment of the spine. Remember that your head is the last part of your spine, so to say, and you always, if you have control, if you have a tie-up here, like my wrist and collar here, I always want to have my head pointing straight forward, because if I put my head to the sides, I also break the alignment of my spine, and therefore, and because of that, I will lose a lot of strength. So I need to keep my head in a straight line and either put it to the front of my partner's forehead or to his temples. Okay, so either here on the front or on the temples, but don't put your head ear to ear. This is no good for no reason. Okay, so here, head to head. Don't let your opponent push your head to the outside, but you need to maintain and keep the head control. Okay, always straightforward for good alignment. So that was it. This was it. Distance management in a low stance. And next week we will talk about, well, more Bagua Zhang content again. But remember, this is important stuff to practice. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and speak soon.